In a fiery and contentious exchange on PITW, Brian tackles one of the most divisive cultural debates of our time, gender identity and its impact on children, clashing head-on with a guest who defends the idea of fluid identity and early exposure to non-traditional concepts of self. What begins as a discussion about choice and inclusivity quickly spirals into a broader commentary on science, truth, and the role of elites in shaping public discourse. As Brian challenges the guest's logic, questioning why self-identification applies to gender but not to race, the segment exposes deep philosophical and ideological rifts about reality, mental health, and societal responsibility. Is embracing fluid identity a compassionate evolution, or a dangerous detachment from biological truth? This episode doesn't just explore the controversy, it plunges right into the storm.
Hey y'all, and welcome to PoliticalCommentary. My name is Brian, and Tucker has a near aneurysm trying to understand the nonsense coming out of his guest's mouth.
You can decide whether or not you want to be a boy or girl or non-binary.
Yeah, but you can't actually decide, and I'm for choice, and there are a lot of biological realities that I'm sad about, that I would change about I'm sincere, that I would change about myself, and so I'm not attacking anybody, but don't you think that biological reality matters, and lying to kids and telling them, actually you could be 6'7", or you could have blue eyes instead of brown, or whatever. I mean, those are lies, and it's never a good idea to lie to kids, is it?
I don't think it's a lie. I think it's actually giving children more information at a younger age than we traditionally have, right? So I'm going to give a comparison. It's like raising a child to not assume that they're heterosexual, right? The way I've raised my children is to say, I don't know what they're going to be, and I'm not just going to assume that they're gay or they're straight. I just give them lots of information, expose them to lots of people.
There's a difference here, because whereas, we don't know a lot about the biology of homosexuality, we know a lot about the biology of sex, because we know that it begins in the chromosomal level. There's a science piece to this that's being ignored by people who I thought believed in science. So that's why I'm a little bit confused.
I don't think it's being ignored. I think what we're seeing, though, in the federal study and what's come out in terms of the Census Bureau is that if 1.4 million people don't identify with the gender marker that they were given at birth, we have to take note of that and say what's going on, that there's a fluidity about gender, and it's not necessarily rooted in biology.
Let me get this straight, because you actually make a little bit of sense here, and then you stumble back off into the weeds, which is, of course, what most psychologists actually do. So you're admitting that 1.4 million people do have a sort of mental health problem. So it does need to be tackled from that angle. But in that case, it needs to be dissuaded and treated, not given.
In this intense and polarizing segment from PITW, host Brian engages in a heated conversation with a guest over the controversial topic of gender identity, particularly as it relates to children and societal norms. The discussion begins with Tucker, possibly referring to a co-host or satirical figure, struggling to make sense of what he considers nonsensical and contradictory reasoning from the guest, who advocates for allowing children to explore gender identity beyond traditional binary norms. The guest argues that offering children broader information about identity fosters awareness, comparing it to not assuming a child's sexual orientation. She emphasizes that gender identity isn't strictly tethered to biology, citing that over 1.4 million people in the US no longer identify with their birth-assigned gender, a statistic she believes calls for greater societal acknowledgement and support. However, Brian sharply counters this view, insisting that sex is a biological reality.
More life. It doesn't need to be fed into then. It means it's an unhealthy thing, and you're helping the delusion. At least that's the logical conclusion that you would come to, which of course she naturally won't ever admit.
Why does that not extend to race?
Tell me what you mean by that. You're going to have to explain that one to me.
If I can say I'm a woman, why can't I say I'm a Chinese woman and be taken every bit as seriously? And I'm not mocking you. I'm making a sincere point, and it's a sincere question. What's the difference?
I think it's a great question. I think as we progress as a society, some of these labels that we're putting on things, and I can't necessarily go to the race question, although one of the things that I've loved about your program as of late is that you're really into this idea of having a more inclusive society and being less separatist in terms of race, that we should be more inclusive. And I think that's what we're saying. We're creating a space at the table for people to be, to have optionality in terms of how they want to identify themselves.
Okay. Well, as long as we're still science-based, then, as a child of the Enlightenment,
it's not taking science off the table. It's just saying, can we look at it from another perspective?
Okay.
That was a whole lot of talk that said a whole lot of nothing. Man, what a word salad. And get this, she's trying to backtrack because she doesn't want to make any incendiary statements, which means that this woman actually does seem to care about the topic. And I do enjoy it when people who are this woke, who are this mentally handicapped,
find at the chromosomal level, and that to suggest otherwise is misleading, especially to impressionable children. He critiques what he sees as the psychological field's tendency to indulge rather than challenge what he classifies as mental health delusions. Pushing further, Brian asks a provocative question. If someone can identify as a different gender, why can't they identify as a different race, like a white person claiming to be Chinese, and be taken seriously? The guest dodges the comparison, instead pivoting toward inclusivity and creating optionality for how people identify. This evasion fuels Brian's frustration, leading him to mock her response as a word salad that avoids hard truths and lacks logical cohesion. Despite this, he acknowledges her sincerity, suggesting that she genuinely wants to help people, though he believes her worldview enables delusion rather than addressing its root causes.
I do enjoy it when they try to be sincere because they legitimately want to help these people. I think this woman actually wants to help and be part of the solution. The problem is she's feeding into delusion. And the logical trains of thought that she uses don't end up at the station. They end up getting derailed or thrown off the tracks. And so it astounds me. And it's understandable this happens when you're upper class. This is essentially a rich white liberal. These are the people who basically run American society. And when you have no real, blinders, no real restraints, you'll say anything and think it's true because the entire world is catered to you. These are the people who literally run America, folks. These are the ones that run our media. These are the ones that run our schools, and there is no accountability for this. It is absolutely insane, and it's absolutely draining us as a nation. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed this segment here on Brawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe or tell me where I got it wrong. But folks, until next time, y'all have a good one.
Brian ultimately frames the discussion as emblematic of a larger cultural and political divide, a clash between traditional, science-based realities and what he views as upper-class liberal idealism run amok. In his view, the people advocating for gender fluidity, mostly affluent, insulated elites, are disconnected from real-world consequences and are the same individuals dominating America's media, academia, and policymaking with little accountability. He ends the segment by expressing deep concern for how such unchecked ideologies are eroding the country's foundational values. The core issue here is not merely about gender identity but about how society negotiates truth, science, mental health, and inclusivity, while the host believes the only real solution lies in returning to objective facts and resisting ideological distortions, regardless of how well-intentioned they may be.